Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we've got Kavatender extraordinaire, Evie Castillo, former Kavatender and longtime consumer of both kava and kratom, joining us to discuss Kavatender stories and why we do what we do. I'm so excited to dive right in, so we're going to do exactly that. Thank you so much for being here today, Evie.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this with you, Marina. Loving the podcast and all the fun stuff we're going to talk about.
Yes, and the coolest thing about this podcast so far, at least like from my experience and perspective, has been anytime that there are guests on this podcast, we kind of get to take things in different directions from different perspectives. So, I started by interviewing some brands, Kava and Kettlebells as another fellow podcasting group. And we have, then I started interviewing kava tenders. And I think that this has been such a cool experience because every kava tender has a different background and reason why they love to do the thing. So, you know, lastly, I want to mention here that there's this unique perspective where we have people who are not business owners. They're not trying to push a brand, actively trying to manipulate the market in any particular way. I mean that very neutrally. But we have people who are just genuinely here to serve the people. So all of that being said, Evie, I would absolutely love to hear, and let everybody know here, what is your background? What do you do for fun? And how has Kava and Kratom how does it play a role in those activities?
Yeah, definitely. So, my background with Kava and Kratom specifically um, goes back just a few years ago, kind of around the pandemic time. I want to say around 2021, beginning or around 2021. And, Tyler, he was spending a lot of time over at that one Kava bar. And we actually started spending a lot of time there as regulars. The first time I had Kava, I was like, wow, what is this? I had no idea. I think he just handed me a straight up Tongan. And I was like, okay. And, I really loved the effects of it immediately. I was like, okay, I can get into this. And at that time in particular, I had already been pretty abstinent from alcohol. I hadn't, at that time, I guess you could say it was a little bit social, maybe every few months. But I was like, wow, this is really a better option, and being able to be creative with the drinks and make the mocktails made it absolutely more enjoyable as well. I was like, okay, it can be more than just mud water. So getting into the industry too is really fun because I really took enjoyment in educating new people who are coming in and just like, what is this, and wanting to find a different way, an alternative to having fun and relaxing. As far as fun, I love to be active. So, my boyfriend and I, Danny, we do a lot of jujitsu. I'd say we're doing that at least 5 days a week, and he's probably doing it more. Um, but he really kicks my butt. So I really can't afford to get trash on alcohol anyway, even if I enjoyed it. I just wouldn't be able to perform well in our sport. And it's one of my biggest passions, honestly. And if I couldn't do it, I'd be pretty miserable. So I definitely am here to talk about, recovery, endurance, and maybe alternatives for recreational use too. Because, us athletes, we want to have fun too. So that's kind of my background. Definitely very active and very into the mocktail scene, if you will, and learning more about herbs. You've taught me so much, Marina, about different herbs. And I'm just like, there's literally something for everything. So the more I learn, the more I'm like, okay, I don't need to take a pill for this or that. Let's go find this herb and try it out.
Yes. And a little bit more background for people, just to give you guys some context. Evie is definitely my sister-in-law. So we've gotten to do a lot of Kava and Kratom activities and festivities, both personally and professionally, because we also got to work together at a kava bar. And, not only just as Kavatenders, but as management. So Evie did a lot of work with managing events in this space, which is a lot. So all of that being said, in today's episode, we're gonna hit two main topics. We're gonna start the first half of this episode talking about botanicals and athleticism, and really just diving into how kava and kratom and other botanicals as well will be mentioning throughout this episode that are helpful and can still give you a good time without, the cost that alcohol comes, not only, uh, the night or the day after with hangovers, but also like long-term effects. And then in the second half of this episode, we're going to dive deeply into event management in sober spaces and what kind of special considerations are should be taken into consideration, but also like why management can be a wild time in this space too. So let's go ahead and start with the sporty side of things and really talk about what happens when you're consuming alcohol. So, we all know hangovers suck and they really break down the body. And the older we get, the more it hurts. So, Evie, what's your favorite way to have a good time without sacrificing, your training sessions?
Red kratom is definitely my favorite. If I'm feeling a little cheeky, then maybe I'll mix some red and white kratom. It's definitely an interesting combination for me personally. And again, I like CBD extract sometimes added to my drink. Just again, it adds to that level of relaxation in my muscles. So it's a good time, I personally think. And I'm also really enjoying Kana. I've had it both in a canned seltzer as well as extract added to a mocktail. And I've been pleased every time with how I feel. Just a really good heart opener and a good social drink, I would say.
Are there any other drinks or like things that you have to do, like eating or whatever, that you feel is really, really important, like while you're consuming these drinks?
Oh, for sure. You have to stay hydrated while you're consuming these beverages. Just like with alcohol or a lot of other things, you have to consume in moderation and you want to hydrate with just about everything, every drink you consume. So, staying on top of your hydration. What was it in Luminade that's added to it? It was so good. Was it the milk thistle?
So let me think. Oh, I think you're thinking of all the bitters, but we added those to the Luminade, which also has the electrolytes in it, and also
Right,
only has monk fruit and stevia instead of
right.
any of the other sweeteners.
Yeah. So I really liked all the added stuff to it because while you're drinking it, added nutrients, added minerals, while you're consuming it. It's a really good benefit to keeping you hydrated and feeling good while you're consuming the mocktail. And me personally, just simply drinking a glass of water with every kratom drink, and I've been great. So I like to also make sure I have a good meal in me before I start consuming kratom. I mean, over time, my tolerance has increased, so it's not as bad as it used to be. But I like a little hearty meal so that I'm not drinking it on an empty stomach. Sometimes, in the past, I've gotten a little nausea, but just like with alcohol, I wouldn't drink alcohol on an empty stomach either, or most other supplements or any other type of stimulant. I guess I shouldn't say that. You might want to edit that out.
Nah, you're good. You're good. Because here's the thing. We know that kratom is a coffee relative. So,
Right.
and this all plays in together too, because coffee's a diuretic, right? So you wouldn't want to drink coffee on an empty stomach. And if you do, like, I don't know how you do it because I cannot. But
No, I can. I get nauseated. I truly get nauseated on caffeine on an empty stomach. And, it's just best to get a nice little snack at least so you're not just going straight in and expecting to feel super good after your drink. If you want to feel your best, get a little snack, get a little something to absorb some of the kratom, and you'll be feeling really great. So yeah, I'll have little snacks with me. Those are just some little things I do prior. Just hydrate. That's the biggest thing. And that's the biggest thing in life, especially if you're in Arizona like I am. If you're not hydrating, I don't know how you're alive.
It's true. It's true. And I think it's really important to talk about, like, before we dive into the super specifics of being an athlete, just the general consumption of kratom. It has to be in a certain lifestyle. And I know, in the episode that aired right before this one, where we interviewed Hessa from Luminade, we discussed a lot about why those electrolytes are really important. And I
Mhm.
think, to add to that, since we did bring up the milk thistle, those of you who are not familiar with All the Bitter, it is an amazing company that makes non-alcoholic bitters. So they use glycerin instead of alcohol. So if that is important to you to not have any alcohol whatsoever, um, they are wonderful at that. But also their formulations are incredible. And one of them, the aromatic bitters, has milk thistle in it, and they jam pack so many herbs into every single bottle. Um, it's actually pretty incredible how potent these bitters are. So adding, a few shakes of those bitters into your kratom drinks, not only are they going to make them taste better, but it will also actually have a benefit of, making sure that your liver has some support and ensuring that anytime you're consuming anything to be really really aware of how to do so in a supported way. I think that this is the most important thing because when we see why kratom goes bad, like why it has a bad reputation, why people have a bad time with it, it's because either they don't have an education themselves, the person serving it to them didn't educate them and let them know, like, hey, in order to have the best time ever, here's some advice. Like, and that's why we're here right now. And we want to give you all the advice, especially if you're a badass like Evie and you go to jujitsu and you want to kick some booty and you don't want anything to kick your own booty, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah. I'm at a point right now where I do it more for enjoyment. Sometimes throughout the week I'll consume it, especially now in the mornings with my early schedule. I like a good kratom seltzer, or if I can get something brewed for myself, then absolutely I'll pick that up because it helps me stay mentally focused, especially, there's green kratom. My personal favorite for energy, though, is going to be the white kratom. That definitely gets me going. I'm not going to crash from it like I do with my coffee. And it's just overall my favorite option over anything. And while I was working behind the bar, I really did enjoy experimenting with like the Odyssey, lion's mane, cordyceps, and all those lovely things that help with the mental focus and energy, without really giving too much of a over what's the word I'm looking for? Overstimulating effect, if you will. It was
yeah.
just it brings me to that very present awareness where I'm like, okay, and I'm zoned in. So, for work, that's definitely my go-to right now. Um, but yeah, I've kind of gone
Yeah.
on a tangent that we're talking about now.
I love it though, because it just goes to show that like botanicals are a lifestyle, right? Like when people say that, sometimes it's easy to eye roll, but in this situation, it's like once you open up your eyes to the possibilities of things outside of coffee and alcohol, the things that have been very normalized in our society. And hey, I'm not sitting here, I'm not trying to poop on coffee. I love coffee from time to time as well. But
Oh yes.
there are a lot of studies out there that show that regular caffeine consumption and becoming like very addicted to caffeine and only consuming it in one way over and over again, it can have negative side effects for your long-term health. So it's important to be able to understand that there are different options out there and there are, like, for example, a lot of the caffeine products out there. The very first thing that always comes to my head is like energy drinks like Monster or Red Bull that are just jam-packed full of who even knows what. And they definitely have already shown and proven themselves to cause very detrimental health problems for a lot of people. So, what are the different ways that we can, you know, get our focus, get our energy, get our drive, our motivation to naturally give us a little bit more of that boost than falling into another addictive cycle. And I know in this podcast we do talk about alcohol a lot, but I am guilty myself of quite frankly abusing caffeine with the amount and levels that I have consumed it from time to time. But every time I have an Odyssey, I don't feel that way. So, Evie, I'm just so curious for you, you know, some people use white kratom, for example, as like a pre-workout, but then
Mhm.
Odyssey, even though that's an example of something that has functional mushrooms that are also very invigorating, but in a different way, like, would you have something different the day that you're competing versus a normal day, or would you have the same routine every day?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably be different the day I'm competing because there's different factors like, trying to make weight. So I have to be really careful about what I consume. But when it comes to competing, yes, I pretty much stick to a regimen. I would definitely prefer the white kratom or the functional mushrooms in the Odysseys before and during training. It helps me to focus the best I can, learning all these crazy new moves and trying to execute them. But those are pretty much my go-tos. And for recovery, I'm really enjoying red kratom. It's always been a great relaxer. Oh, and going circling back to the caffeine, yeah, I really enjoy caffeine as well. However, I do have anxiety. I guess a lot of us do these days, but I do notice that caffeine really increases my anxiety throughout the day. And it doesn't show up in huge ways, but it just feels like I'm just slightly on the edge. And then I do tend to experience a crash. So, in place of caffeine, I do prefer a white kratom or an Odyssey, something that's gonna make me present, but not make me feel wiry and not make me feel sick and not gonna make me crash. So that's definitely something I take from that. I don't like messing with my anxiety if I'm drinking too much coffee. I'm probably gonna have a rougher day. Um, and then, back to recovery, my red kratom, my CBD extracts, and I really enjoyed the mellow wine, CBD wine. That was probably my favorite thing at the bar, and being able to make mocktails with that wine. It was just so versatile being able to make things with the white and the red. And for me, that was one of my best recovery drinks. Honestly, I just got that full body relaxation. Um, and throughout the day, I really enjoyed the wellness tinctures. So I honestly, what I miss most working at a kava bar is having access to all of the best tinctures, um, just right there at your hands. And I really enjoyed Shilajit. As you know, it's really good for your gut health, your skin, uh, chlorophyll, really excellent for inflammation in your body. So, there's so many things throughout the day you can take to really help with your endurance. Ashwagandha is also a great one for endurance and muscle recovery. Definitely one of my favorites I've been using a lot more often. There's actually a kava product I've been using on and off. It's, a powder, but it includes a lot of ashwagandha. So, again, it improves your muscle strength, endurance, quality of life. It's really great for relaxation as well. Um, the cordyceps, again, at work or before my training in jujitsu, I really love the cordyceps. It improves your endurance. So if I'm feeling a little lacking in energy, which happens a lot as I'm adjusting to my new work schedule. I'm up at like 3:30 in the morning, and my class is at 7 p.m. So
Oof.
it's a little, yeah, it's quite a stretch of a day. So, the cordyceps will help me with my endurance and energy too. So I like to kind of go back and forth so I don't get accustomed to one thing, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not drinking kratom necessarily every day. Some days it's other herbs to kind of get to the same effect. And me, we're always experimenting. So I pick up whatever I can at any kava bar I can. And, it's really a fun journey, honestly. But those are some of the biggest things for me. Again, I can't stress enough, like the CBD wine. Um, Kava as well, actually, for relaxation. Vanuatu kava was probably my favorite, and sometimes I would even mix it with my red kratom. So I'm getting that full body relaxing Vanuatu, the nummies in the mouth. You got your red kratom also kind of unwinding you. So, I mean, if you can make a great mocktail with that, it's a great combo. So yeah, that's pretty much my go-tos. I'm still learning a lot about what I can take during the day to help with my joints. Um, there's a lot out there, but ashwagandha has been probably my favorite recently. And there's a lot of coffees I'm seeing out there or mixed drinks that are starting to include stuff like that, like the ashwagandha or the chaga mushrooms. So I mean, it's a really interesting time getting to learn about all this stuff and experiment, even outside of kava and kratom, which is pretty much what started me in all of this. And um, starting me into a journey of health and wellness that I wasn't really expecting beyond exercise and just, your daily vitamin. So,
Yeah, and it's so cool because every single thing that you mentioned here is not something that would go against any sort of like regulation in anything that you're competing in. Like
no, no,
it's not like any of these things show up on tests that would get you kicked out of really anything. Like I don't know anybody that tests for any of these things, nor that they stay in your body long enough to be detected.
no. No, in fact, actually, I'm sure Tyler showed you some clips from the latest UFC. Max Holloway, one of the main events, he in that crazy knockout with 2 seconds left. I just saw an ad for him. I actually reposted it. He was promoting New Brew, which for those of you who don't know, New Brew is a kava and kratom seltzer. And I loved his verbiage in the ad, and it was like something like finding your flow state and finding that flow. And I was like, wow. And he, this guy's a badass. And he even mentions in the ad, it's a great alcohol alternative, and also great because he's an athlete, and it keeps it drinking that product specifically, the one he's promoting. He's saying, hey, I'm doing this because it's not keeping me from what I'm focused on, which is competing and freaking knocking mfers out. um so I was really pleased to see that it's becoming more and more prevalent with athletes. We've seen a lot more advertisement, of course, for feel free amongst athletes. Again, with everything, you want to take and consume everything in moderation. I know a lot of these products that are being promoted out there are extract heavy, and we always want to be careful with products like that. It just hits the stomach and is processed differently. So, but we're seeing a lot more of these seltzers and tonics out there, which is kind of cool. And just do your research. But I thought that was super cool to see a very well known athlete, an accomplished athlete, really shining a spotlight on a kava and kratom seltzer, and one that's really good. I personally really like the berry and mango flavor. Those two different flavors were not bad, and the mocktails we were able to come up with them were actually really tasty. So fun drink, definitely recommend it.
Yeah, New Brew is a really great example because that one is kava and kratom, and if you've ever tasted it, like you can taste like it tastes like an adult drink. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things that it's, I mean, at least in my opinion, not simple to chug, which is good. And as you mentioned, it's very easy to make it into a delicious mocktail if you want to turn it into like a longer sipping experience. But there's a few things you touched on here that like I really want to emphasize. Um, my experience before and during working at the last kava bar I was at, I was a shuffler at the time. So, for those of you who don't know what shuffling is, it's like this crazy dance style that is very popular in rave culture. It definitely has a lot of running man, a lot of T-stepping. You're essentially running in place at a very high BPM, doing some fancy footwork, and it's nothing but cardio. And I was doing that probably somewhere between 20 to 30 hours a week while I was actively kava tending 4 days a week. Those 4 days a week, I think I was behind the bar somewhere between 20 to 30 hours a week, maybe. Um, But point of that story is when you're behind the bar, you're constantly in motion. And I always wanted to only work the weekend shifts. So I was the Thursday, no wait, I was the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday closer. So that meant that I was constantly running around, whether I was clocked in or I was shuffling, which means literally 60 hours a week, I was constantly in motion. I had nothing on my body anymore to the point where I got cold if it got 80 degrees. And that time of my life was very like I was I was pushing myself so hard physically because I was honestly dancing through just a lot of like processing things because this is like 2021, like right after and during the quarantine stuff. So I'm just like running to keep sanity, I guess. And the reason I wanted to like tell this whole story in context is because like when I found kava, I already had stopped drinking alcohol in 2019 and I was already like, man, I can't even touch psychedelics like on a chill level anymore because I was going really, really hard on stuff and I really just wanted to be stone cold sober. So then when I found kava and then I started drinking kratom as well, like a couple months after kava because I needed to be warmed up to it, I would only, let's put it this way. I would only have enough to start feeling the effects. Like I never pushed it over the edge. So I never drank an entire like Tanoa, like an entire bucket of kava that during that phase. I always drank the minimum required dosage, which at the time with a reverse tolerance effect was probably somewhere between 4 and 8 servings. And all of that being said, I would be able to literally, again, run in place for hours. It never stopped me. The kratom, the white kratom especially, was essential to like keeping like I was busting and beating records when I'd get in these like dance battles with people. Like I was able to last longer than anyone else. Like I had the longest endurance. And even though there was other sober people there that also did not drink alcohol, what was their fuel source? They were drinking energy drinks. They were drinking and actually taking different kinds of pre-workout and doing all these other crazy things. And I was just, I don't know, I just came to the party with a red and white kratom mix because the red and white that that smacks because you've got the
Yeah,
whole
chef's kiss.
relief, but then you're also going, yeah. So I was drinking that, and I would just, I would be able to dance the entire night away and having an amazing time and be in that flow state. And then the kava would be an amazing, like component to the muscle recovery. Like it definitely took away some of the, like it allowed my body to relax and not be all twitchy because that's how I would go so hard that like I'd be in pain and I'd just start twitching. So like that would allow me to like actually sleep well at night without having my legs just like feeling like they were
Oh, girl,
seizuring from working too
I feel
hard.
that. I feel that
Yeah.
so hard with jujitsu. You know, all my teammates are, we just get beat up every day, but have fun doing it, obviously. But it's a lot on the body. It's a lot on the body. And, you know, I have a lot of people in the class I go to that I don't know, all age ranges, honestly, but there's a lot of us in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and we're still kicking. We're still kicking. And for me, Red Kratom, I'm telling you, is a great one for helping me be able to relax my muscles and be able to sleep a little bit more soundly. Again, CBD too. I freaking love CBD
Love
for that reason,
CBD.
especially. Uh, just letting my body just fully relax and definitely my go-to for my neck pain when I'm getting choked out, which is every time, honestly, to be honest. But yeah,
But at least it let
that's
you be able to flow. Like you have the ability to like you're not crashing while you're on the mat. You can have that energy without being chaotic about it. You can be laser sharp focused instead of like, "Yeah, I'm the Hulk, I'm gonna do everything."
yeah. You know, and sometimes to offset that, I mean, I take other herbals, if you know what I mean. What's actually interesting, Marina, is I found in BJJ because you know I started just a little over 2 years ago. It was, yeah, 2 years ago in January. But you know, I knew I really found my people because I didn't realize how many people in the art actually partake. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. More herbs, more, and a lot of people find it helps them in their flow, or sometimes it's just people who like to partake after class because it helps them relax. So, you know, that's just another great herb that I'm a big fan of that helps with my kind of my recovery, if you will. Add that with your CBD and kratom, and you're
Yeehaw.
sitting pretty.
Hell yeah. There's so many benefits to so many different forms of cannabis. And I think that, you know, I would often get asked behind the bar, like, hey, does this mix well with like, the smoky smoke? And to be honest with you, we would always upsell people to give them, like CBD uh,
Oh yeah.
pre-rolls. And oh my gosh, we hit the jackpot once we found those CBD pre-rolls that also have like lavender or rose in them.
Oh, those were my
Because,
favorite.
yeah, you'd be surprised how many herbs you can actually smoke, and actually they still have really great effects. And lavender is one of them. The lavender CBD pre-roll combo was my all-time favorite. And like mixing that with a mocktail that also goes along with that flavor profile is like sensory, just
Oh gosh. Yes. A
heaven.
rose drink. Oh yeah. A tasty rose drink with a rose CBD. Oh,
Mm.
definitely my favorite. I love the lavender and I like the mint. And I was
Ooh.
actually surprised with the effects because as a regular consumer of cannabis, I didn't think I would get much benefit or effect. But again, with CBD, I found a lot of relaxation, and again, paired up with a really good mocktail, you're in for a good evening.
Yeehaw. And I feel like this is a really great point to mention and I'm going to do a whole episode on this topic, but just a friendly reminder that those of you who listen to this who are sober, who have seen me talk about being sober, and you notice that I say, hey, I don't drink alcohol, but I love cannabis. It's because everybody has a different definition of sobriety. Everybody's context is going to be different. So, anytime you're
Agreed.
listening to these episodes, if there are certain botanicals that you hear come out of our mouths that make you feel some type of way, I really just want to challenge you to sit with that and think, okay, am I feeling that way because it genuinely does go against my sobriety and I'm not interested in this? Or is it coming from a place of lack of knowledge? Or is it coming from a place of someone else had a really bad experience, so you're just really not sure like who to trust on what and who's their best source, and you're just still trying to learn some things. Just really be aware of where those feelings are coming from, because that's going to help you understand how to navigate all of this and what kind of drinks to make. Because, for example, we just did this awesome photo shoot, and you're going to hear me talk about this functional mocktail and mixology guide coming out pretty soon here. But what's important to know there is there are a few brands that we were working with that sent us samples from a variety of different botanicals. And what was really cool about it was the fact that everybody at the little gathering was able to grab a drink that was just right for them. It was an alcohol-free gathering where a bunch of mixologists got together and we were just playing around with making some fun recipes. And my favorite part about it was everybody grabbed a different can and everybody had a different reason as to why that can was the best one. And the reality of the matter is, like, yeah, every single can was the best can because everybody's going to have a different experience and different reasons for wanting the different drinks. And, when Evie, when you mentioned the CBD wine, I feel like this is an excellent example too, where it's like some people just aren't into, teas. Like they just can't stand the taste of tea, but they want to relax, but they love wine. Well, there are alcohol-free wines out there that all you have to do is, of course, you can always add. There are some amazing CBD wines. There are just non-alcoholic wines you can add CBD extract or any other extract to. And cool trick I just learned. Again, shout out to all the bitter. Like I'm not paid by these people at all. I just love them. If you use their bitters, their non-alcoholic bitters, and you add it to a non-alcoholic wine, you can make that non-alcoholic wine taste like wine, if that's your thing. And then you can add whatever extract you want to it to heighten whatever effect you want without ever having consumed alcohol. So you can still, I mean, technically you can get away with drinking wine on Wednesday at 10 a.m. and it could be considered a wellness thing and a true act of self-care instead of like a self-sabotagey kind of self-care where we
Yeah.
like pretend like it's good for us, but in reality it's self-sabotaging. You can turn these drinks into something that genuinely is good for you. Um, yeah, and the fact that you can cycle them all out, it's so cool, and I love these points you brought up, Evie.
Oh yeah, and actually that just reminds me too. I really love that non-alcoholic champagne. What was it? Toast.
Toast,
That was
yeah.
super amazing. I only regret that we didn't add some OJ to it for like mimosas one day because that would have
Ugh.
been really good.
Next time we hang out, that's what we're gonna do.
Oh yeah, we're doing toast and toast mimosas.
Toast mimosas. And you guys, toast is literally just like because we had it at the wedding and it was a bubbly white tea, not white kratom, like white tea leaf and some ginger and I think a couple other
Cranberry. Yeah,
cranberry
cranberry.
and one other thing. It was the most basic list of on planet Earth, but it literally like it had the perfect little like zhuzh in the mouth, nice and spicy. So it felt like it was something, but it was actually really good because the toasts happened, surrounding dinner. So it was actually really good because the ginger and the sparkling stuff made it really great for everybody's digestive situation. So it ended up being a functional mocktail instead of just like something that we do ceremoniously for some reason.
If you wanted to add more to it, we did have a little special on it for a while where we were adding your choice of like extract. So if you were looking for a little more, as you said, zhuzh to that functional mocktail, you could really add just about anything to it, and it'll just up level it.
So cool. So cool, the art of mixology. And that being
Yes.
said, we're going to add another layer to that conversation right now. So far, what we've been talking about is botanicals within, the athletics and how we can be functional with our entire lives while still consuming all these different things, still having a good time. So when we're asking our bodies to perform, there's typically a context surrounding that performance, right? It's one thing to go out into, doing your practice and all that jazz, but eventually there's a competition or eventually there's a show if you're more of an entertainer. And there's some sort of place where you put it all on display. And when we're talking about the context of kava bars, this specifically tends to be in the arenas of arts and entertainment as well as wellness education. So if we're talking about the context in which we are consuming these botanicals, that's going to be equally as important. Because, for example, if I'm going to be hanging out in a place with a bunch of losers who just have a horrible mindset where, you know, they're asking me to do unhealthy things or do things, or maybe they just say mean things and they're not very supportive. It doesn't matter how many functional mocktails I have, like I'm gonna perform horribly because the environment didn't make me feel like a winner. Or maybe I'm consuming media in a place that's actually making me lazy instead of inspiring me to become more, trained within my art form. So this is where it's really important. If you're a business owner listening to this episode and you're maybe starting to think about marketing strategies to bring athletes in. Obviously, we've given you some great ideas. You're welcome. But also, we want to talk about what events you can host inside your space that not only cater to athletes, but also how you manage all the different types of people that are going to be coming through, right? So, for example, having a musician on your roster is going to be different than if you have a person who maybe they are a wellness practitioner and they are here to teach a qigong class. Maybe there's someone who wants to have like a wellness conversation and an education like seminar on how to properly fuel yourself. Maybe there's like a nutritionist and someone who's helping you understand those kinds of things. We want to make sure that we talk about how to marry the mocktail with the experience. So, Evie, I know we've got so many different things we could talk about under the event management
Yeah.
in sober space umbrella, but I'd love to just start by asking you, how do you feel like what's it like in general to attend a sober event versus one where there are other people who are drinking?
Me personally, I feel like it's much more enjoyable. You can have more in depth and meaningful conversations. You're going to find that there's less conflict because there's not anything lost in communication because people aren't understanding each other because they're just, not themselves. I do find the events to be a lot more enjoyable, a lot more manageable too, because you're not, again, having to navigate people, kind of herd them in a certain way, because again, it can get kind of chaotic when you're hosting a big event and there's just a lot of alcohol involved. It can get,
Yeah.
we all know, it can get really wild, it can get really loud, conflicts can arise. So you're not going to see as much of that I mean, being in our other location in Phoenix, yeah, we saw our fair share just because of the location. Man, it was something there. And that's a whole other thing we had to navigate on top of, bar managing and events. We had to take in consideration the area and take different safety precautions. But my goodness, that's a whole other topic. Um, but yeah, the space that you use for the drinks and what you bring in. So if we're talking certain classes, like you mentioned, qigong, um, really speaking to your audience and knowing your customers, and if you want to promote more to athletes, for sure, uh, stick to something that's going to help them recover. So like yoga is always going to be great. I mean, depending on your space that you have in your bar, if you have patios or if you have another site you all want to manage and meet at, there's different options there. But definitely making the experience with a mocktail was my favorite thing about it. So that's how it's different, because you're not going to go to, we all know you're going to go to a bar event and get trash. That's what you're going for. You're going to go see a game, you're going to drink, and, you're going to eat your bar food and all that. But, there's more intention when you're coming into a kava bar, um, or any botanical tea shop. There's a lot more intention there. You're not going to run into all the same shenanigans. So if you're going there for an event, my favorite again is more towards the health and wellness. And we tried getting groups together for those talking groups, which in theory are so great, but you have to really find the right person to run a group like that. You have to be sure they're on the same, really on the same page as the business goes, and that it's all the same vibe. Because if you have someone that's not going with the brand and going off and doing their own thing, we experienced interesting things, as you recall. But all in all, to answer your question, though, I do find our events a lot more enjoyable than, say, an alcohol bar. It's going to be, again, much more intentional, much more meaningful with the conversations, and a lot of social and heart openers with a lot of the different mocktails you can experience, along with your class. So I really thought the breath work and meditation was really fitting with our community, especially people interested in just relaxation and recovery. So if you're managing a bar and you're trying to get these kind of events going, I think it's super beneficial to offer some sort of a special for those who are attending, and definitely working something out and building a really good rapport with your practitioners. Really making it beneficial for everybody involved. So you have to really come to an agreement to where it makes sense for the space, and it's a mutual exchange of energy. So, getting on board with your practitioners, having regular meetings with them so that you're really on the same page and staying on brand with what the group is trying to present to the community, it's really important, and that makes for a great experience for everybody. And yeah.
So important to talk about community here and how that really, hmm. Okay, so here's the two different conflicting thoughts I'm having at the same time. So, on one hand, you want to make sure, like, because if we're talking in the context of sober spaces, obviously on this podcast, we talk a lot about kava bars. I genuinely believe that this still applies to non-alcoholic, like, mocktail spaces as well. But in general, when you have these sober spaces where people are not trashed, they are aware. You can't get away with saying weird things behind the bar. Like they're gonna hear you if you're talking shit. They're gonna be more receptive to a bad mood Kavatender, or if an event's details are not all lined up, so it's caused confusion for the Kavatenders and even the people who are attending. All of those pain points are felt much more intensely.
Mm,
So that makes events a little bit more difficult. However, in my experience and opinion, I feel like when an event does go well, you can feel the success of that on such a different, genuinely life-changing level. I have seen so many events come through the space that ended up bringing people like to tears, like ma helping people heal parts of themselves that otherwise may not have been healed or felt. And to provide that opportunity for someone's journey requires so much tender, loving care. I feel like, Evie, the hardest part of your job and something that, like, I was always just like, damn, bless her soul. Like, you always had to talk to so many people all the time. Like, I don't know that it was possible for, like, you had to like hide at home, didn't you? Just to be able to get some like computer stuff done.
Oh yeah, I ended up spending more time at home just so that I could try and get work done. But even outside of work, it was like, lots of curious people trying to get in with us and see what it's about, which I don't blame them. But it was, it was a lot. It was a lot for what I was working with, if you know what I mean. So it was yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience, but I really enjoyed connecting with the community and being able to bring some people's visions up. It was a challenge in a lot of ways, especially at the time that we had transitioned over to a new venue. Gosh, that just kind of, I don't know, you're trying to fill the space and find appropriate activities to fill the space, and you're still figuring out the budget, and you're talking to a million people because all those people remember the old venue, and it was a lot. There was a lot of huge expectations going from kind of a more casual lounge into this, big venue kind of meant for entertainment. It really became a challenge from there, trying to figure out, okay, where can we fit people in here? We can have practitioners here at this time. It was a huge transition. And for things like that, you definitely want support from your community, which I feel we did get big time. A lot of people wanted to step in and see, our team specifically succeed, and that's what's so important about the community.
All kava bars go through, and all non-alcoholic lounges, of course, they all go through different things for different reasons. And what type of event can work at one kava bar may not work at another one. And even if you are this, maybe you have multiple locations, you may find that one thing works at one location and it's not going to work at the other. But really understanding who your community is going to be the game changer here. And again, pulling this context back together of, you know, performing, really making sure that what execution is about to happen is fully supported by the mocktails that you choose to serve at these events. So, for example, if we're having a conversation, like a meeting, kind of an event where there's like a conversation that's happening with audience that's not physical but it's very mental. I'm not serving people electrolytes. That doesn't even make sense. They're sitting down. Like I'm going to be
Right.
serving them something that gives them mental stimulation, like an odyssey with functional mushrooms. I'm not going to otherwise, if I'm having a sound bath type of an event, I'm not going to be serving people white kratom. They're going to be